round of lectures in the Madrigos Midwest Still Parenting in a Pandemic series. My name is Rachie Karish, and I am the Executive Director of Madrigos Midwest. During the past many months, as this pandemic has shifted our entire world, we have each had to make some significant and difficult changes in our lives in order to adjust to this new reality. In addition to people experiencing significant losses, having people we know and care about fall sick around us, and the fear of contracting COVID-19, we've also had to place major restrictions on ourselves in terms of where we can go and who we can see. Painfully, we lack physical exposure to many of our family members and friends. Our children are constantly going back and forth between learning in school and then learning at home. Many working parents are having to work at home to also meet their kids' needs. Still others are at home alone and feeling very isolated and by themselves. To say the least, we are living through times of tremendous and unprecedented uncertainty. Fear, worry, and stress are all normal responses to uncertainty. The famous psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl coined the phrase, an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal. And so it is completely normal that both we and our children are experiencing heightened feelings of stress and anxiety during this time. Due to this new normal, Madrigos Midwest has been working with focus and determination to meet the needs of our community during this critical time. We have added new therapists to meet the growing mental health needs, and we continue to offer both in-person and remote counseling options for all of our clients. All of the work that we do here at Madrigos Midwest has been made even better because of tonight's presenter. Earlier this year, Madrigos Midwest added an incredible resource to our already very talented team with the hiring of Mrs. Lynn Shyman. Lynn holds the essential role of clinical supervisor at the Madrigos Midwest Moses and Helen Stern Counseling Center. Her vast experience, her wisdom, and her humility have already had a tremendous impact on all of us. As background, Lynn is a psychotherapist with certification in cognitive behavioral therapy. She was formerly the Director of Counseling Services in the Skokie Center of Jewish Child and Family Services, where she provided clinical supervision, staff training, and administrative oversight. She is a highly respected clinician and a mentor to many of us in this field. Tonight, Lynn will be addressing the topic of recognizing and helping your child's anxiety. We will leave time for question and answers at the end, so feel free throughout the presentation to use the Q&A button on the bottom to submit your questions. All questions will be anonymous, and I'll try to get through as many as possible at the end of the evening. Without further ado, I would like to turn the screen over to Lynn.
Okay, thank you, Rachie. Wow, that was lovely. So hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in tonight. I really do hope that you walk away with some helpful ideas. My objectives for tonight are to help you as parents increase your knowledge of your children's anxious responses according to their developmental level, and also to improve your ability to guide your children to manage their anxiety. So 30 or 40 minutes is hardly enough time to cover all that can be discussed on this topic. Also, the title is Recognizing Anxiety Due to COVID, but kids and adults aren't just experiencing anxiety. This COVID era is a period of loss and grieving. Even for kids, even for young kids, COVID has taken from kids a critical dimension of their lives, structure and predictability. Structure and predictability underlie a child's sense of security. So please keep in mind as we discuss anxiety tonight, because the reactions that you see in your children are also a result of contending with loss. So what does anxiety look like in children? I am going to give you a general list of what my books tell me anxiety looks like, and I've divided it into 4 domains. First, emotionally, Kids with anxiety can appear sad, fearful, helpless, or dysregulated. Behaviorally, kids with anxiety can act regressive or aggressive or defiant or withdrawn or parentified, avoidant, attention seeking, and clingy. Socially, kids with anxiety can be withdrawn or passive, or they can be controlling and bossy, or they can be argumentative or overly dependent or defiant about adhering to rules and authority. And physically, kids complain of stomach aches, headaches, insomnia, or hypersleeping, too much sleeping, and general fatigue. Okay, so what child, I ask you, or adult, hasn't had one or more or multiple of these symptoms in the past 6 months? So here's the first takeaway for tonight. If you notice a significant change in your child in any of these four domains, please start to assume that they might be having an interaction to something or to some aspect of COVID. Simply put, if your child's moods and behaviors have changed and the newer behaviors and moods are getting in the way of their ability to savor their life, to savor their friends, their routines, their family, you can assume that they're experiencing anxiety or some kind of a mixed reaction to COVID times. What I'd like to do now is to look at reactions of children, but more narrowly and in developmental groupings. Because I think you all know that anxiety in a 4-year-old is going to look way different than it does in a 14-year-old. So let's talk about 3 different developmental stages in children's lives. I've bunched them together to make it simpler. The first group is preschool and early school ages, let's say 3 to 8. Then there's late school age, which will encompass ages 9 to 13, and then adolescence, 13 to 17. So in young children, ages 3 to 8, we look to children's behaviors for distress and not necessarily to what they say or what they don't say. For preschool and kindergarten, for those of you who have this age group, you know that the hallmark signs of regression are key. Things like toilet accidents, clinging to you during typical separation times or at bedtime. This age group regresses for the same reason that we adults regress. And how do we adults regress? I know I regress by eating macaroni and cheese, or we take more naps, and we also become less concerned about our appearance. Those are all signs of adult regression. So regressing returns all of us, kids and adults, to a time when we felt safer and more soothed and more protected. Kids with anxiety kind of organically regress to feel again that sense of safety. I would expect everyone to regress in some form during COVID times. But for this age group, besides behavioral regression, there's another critical piece. And it's about the way this age group, the 3 to 8-year-olds, the way they think. And this is really relevant to COVID times. This age group, they're very concrete thinkers, and their limited thinking abilities can cause them to make connections and associations between things that are not logical, things that should not be connected. And the result is a narrative that they create and they carry in their minds as something factual, and it's now causing them anxiety. And I want to tell you a simple example that was just recently brought to me. A 5-year-old child with several dating age relatives listened to a very benign adult discussion in her home about not having weddings during COVID. She also later heard angry comments about wedding guests who had become ill with COVID at a particular wedding. And because she has a cousin who just became engaged, she made an assumption that her parents and family will soon be ill because everyone at weddings gets sick and sometimes dies. So for this age group, thinking of that example, it's as if events or incidents, conversations that they overhear are just swirling around above them. You can almost visualize it. Things are swirling all over, things they hear and experience, and they pluck pieces of these things out of the air and they string them together. And they're usually strands of truth that they string together, but they string them together in illogical ways and they form this narrative because they want to understand what they're hearing. I'm going to later talk about how to helpfully converse with children about COVID. But here's the takeaway that's true for this age group even, but for all age groups. Factual information, according to their age, is the central piece of keeping their anxiety at bay. In terms of coping for this 3 to 8 age group, they have very limited coping capacity. They typically don't come to you and identify their feelings and ask for help. They most frequently demonstrate anxiety through behavioral regression, as we said, and especially the young school-age children, like 5 to 8, 6 to 8, they somaticize. They develop stomach aches and headaches, and they have vague, I don't feel good type of symptoms, and that's the way they channel their anxious feelings. So the next age group, ages 8 to 13, has more sophisticated thinking. If the 3 to 8-year-old group regresses behaviorally or they fabricate stories to manage anxiety, this group can do some of that, but they've really grown, and they've really grown cognitively. This age group, 8 to 13, they do a lot more thinking than the younger ones, and they do more evaluative thinking. And therefore, as their anxiety can emerge as worries, or as judgment, or as blaming, or as anger. Especially the middle school age group channels anxiety frequently into a need to blame. One of my middle school age clients, who was really just finding her footing academically and socially when COVID struck, she became enraged at her principal when school was canceled. And she was ranting about the quote, unfairness of the principal's selfish decision to close the school. And that was the way she channeled her anxiety about the whole thing. The issues of unfairness and justice are key concepts for middle schoolers and for high schoolers, of course, too. Because the middle school group is they really are enjoying, they're savoring those new critical thinking skills. They're really less likely to be compliant at home and at school because they prefer to do their own thinking now and make their own decisions. So wishing to practice that new critical thinking skill, they do make their own decisions, such as not wearing masks or opting not to distance from their peers. Children in this age group who have struggled with peer groups and friendships, and there's plenty of them, can manifest their anxiety by largely withdrawing from socializing at all. And defending their decision by using COVID and saying they're isolating themselves because of COVID safety. Naturally, this age group is going to be more vigilant to listen carefully to adult conversations about who is ill, who is hospitalized, who has died, who is being COVID negligent, and who is putting other people at risk. I don't interpret this hypervigilance for info as any idle need to hear gossip. These children at this age, this 8 to 13-year-old group, these children, again, because of their more expansive cognitive ability, they're using all the input they can get, everything they hear, in an attempt to understand this crisis and also to neutralize their worries about loved ones becoming ill. And remember that we as adults, we do the same thing. we know that information can make us feel powerful. And during this time, all of us feel relatively powerless. So that listening for information is something they're going to be doing to enable them to feel a little more powerful. The adolescent group is working on developing their autonomy. And just like toddlers and preschoolers, they vacillate between wanting to depend on their parents a lot and then moving towards becoming enraged when their parents try to control them. COVID anxiety for adolescents can explode into premature attempts at autonomy and other risk-taking behaviors. Teens who are worried about their parents' and grandparents' health can become parentified and channel their own anxiety into over-caring for their younger siblings and possibly caretaking of their own parents. And older adolescents who should now be starting to think about dating or what it will be like, they're also starting to feel anxiety now at the thought of leaving home and beginning a new life away from their family. And I'm hearing more and more about these older adolescents or even the young adults who are backing away from wanting to enter into the whole shidduch world and thinking about marriage. So in talking about adolescence, you'll likely hear that the adolescents are focused on their own lives rather than a focus frequently on health and welfare of family members. This scenario is a typical one for adolescents because adolescents operate from a perception that they and their needs are at the center of the universe. But also it's kind of true for all children of all ages. Children are egocentric, which is another reason to talk honestly with them about this crisis. And when you talk honestly with them about the crisis, be sure to focus on how their lives will change and what will be different in their lives. That is their primary priority, and it's developmentally pretty appropriate. But if children can have a bit more predictability about what they consider to be priorities in their lives, they'll have more mind space to hear about other concerns about other people. So to wrap up this segment of my talk, I think it's less important to be on the lookout for signs of anxiety in children because it's going to be very hard to do. It's more important to proactively help children feel as safe and secure as possible. We know that the daily routines of 2019 are just not attainable right now. But yet defining a daily structure and routine for children is paramount during this time. A predictable routine, even when children are unhappy about it, will bring them an important sense of normalcy. And as an extension of that, during COVID, a parent's job, that job to demonstrate leadership, is more important than ever. And I realize that I'm sounding like I'm advocating an authoritarian home front with rules and routines and structure and being the boss in the home. And you know, in a sense, I am doing exactly that. Because to children and to us, but we're talking about children, to children, life seems to be up for grabs. We have school this week. Oh no, wait, we don't have school this week. We're visiting Bubby and Zadie for Sukkot. No, we're not going to visit Bubby and Zadie for Sukkot. It goes on and on. More than ever, really more than ever, a child is going to feel comforted by rules and routines. And those home rules and routines can be routines about schoolwork, but not just about schoolwork. They can be about personal hygiene. Yes, taking showers, getting dressed, completing household chores, even playtime, any of those rules. Rules and routines should be consistently delivered, but delivered firmly, but with calm and with kindness. So now we come full circle to a comment that I made at the beginning, the importance of factual information and frequent communication. These are the primary thoughts that in a short time I can give you about communicating with your child about COVID. Parents should try to provide brief, concrete, truthful, age-appropriate information to their children about their current life circumstances, whether the child demonstrates anxiety or doesn't demonstrate anxiety, whether the child comes to you with questions or doesn't come to you with questions. Because if there's one thing that I've learned that always stays with me, and I think it is true for adults also, but it sure is true for children. In the absence of real facts and the truth, children will develop anxiety in that space because they know adults are talking about stuff and things are happening and things don't feel good, but they don't know any details about it. Second, conversations should begin by asking children what they already know about COVID or what they've heard from others. Even this late in the game, even 7 months later, the rumors are still spiraling, the stories are going. Children are stringing together facts that should not be strung together and hearing incorrect things and internalizing it. After you ask children what they know or what they've heard, parents should then gently correct their misperceptions or any false information. And based on the bizarre things that I've heard from some of my child clients, I think you would be amazed to hear what children believe to be facts. Discuss their daily life, as we said before, what will change, and importantly, what will not change, because that will give them that sense of security, because a lot is changing, but the more you can do in the home to keep things the same, the more secure they will feel. So what they can expect from you on a daily basis. Don't try your best not to minimize their concerns or falsely reassure them. There's a lot to say about this topic. I could spend an hour talking about it, but if you don't know something, if you don't have the answer to a question they're asking, tell them you don't know. But here's the important part. Also tell them that if and when you learn the answer, you'll share it with them, so that they don't have to keep wondering or running to you and repeating the same question. And I've seen this work very well in families. If you give a child your word that you will check in with them about the question they've asked, it will take down their anxiety and they won't feel that need to keep repeating and asking you the question. So as much as we don't want to give false reassurance from the don't worry, everything's going to be fine, that kind of false reassurance, do be reassuring about your ongoing role as leaders of the family. This could sound like, kids, we're going to do everything we can to keep our family safe. We have rules about how to stay safe, and we are very serious about the rules. In other words, reassure your children, but reassure them by letting them know that you as parents are doing your best to keep them safe. And you can add that the school is doing their best to keep them safe. Importantly, encourage emotional expression. There aren't that many kids that actually come to their parents and dump their feelings out or ask the questions that are really bothering them. I suggest that parents demonstrate the importance of emotional expression by sharing some of your own feelings about COVID. And I'm not suggesting becoming hysterical or dumping a load of worries on them. I am suggesting articulating that you have feelings too. Children, I'm feeling pretty frustrated today. And sometimes, boy, I have a lot of worry about COVID. And you know, I really miss seeing Bubby and Zadie. And every day I think about when I'll be able to see them next. So you're verbalizing, I have feelings about this, they're negative feelings, and I can label them. But I also suggest that you add on to that. And kids, here's what I tell myself to help myself, whatever that may be for you. Other thing I suggest is when you talk about COVID, you try to include words that are hopeful, like brave, strong, helpful, tough. The idea is to be factual about the current harsh reality, because that's what it is, but to also add perspective and hopefulness. And the last part is, importantly, check in with them regularly. I don't want to say this in a disparaging way. I can't tell you how many parents comment to me with the best of intentions and with love in their heart. I think my kid's doing okay. You know, they haven't said a word to me about COVID or anything like that. They seem okay. That is not convincing to me that they don't have anxiety and worried thoughts. Not at all. So what I suggest is to check in with them regularly, even after you have a good, hearty conversation about COVID. You could say something like, you know, that thing we talked about yesterday about, you know, how hard it is to wear masks. Did you think more about it? Is there anything that came to your mind after we talked about it? And they might say, nope, haven't thought a thing about it. Nope, nothing. I got nothing for you, Mom. It's okay. You're giving them a message that that conversation is important to you and you haven't forgotten about it, and you continue to give them the idea that they can bring it up to you. And an example would be, a check-in talk might be, you know, I heard that Shayna's mother has COVID. I hope she's feeling okay. Have you been thinking about her? Have you had a word thought about her? They might say yes, they might share something, or they might say, nope, 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 don't care about that. I only care about if I can go to school tomorrow. It's also fine. You've done your due diligence in bringing it up to them. They hear the implicit message. It's okay and good to talk about this stuff. So you as parents can initiate these conversations with the children. Even if they never come to you, even if, because that really may never happen, as I said. But if you bring it up regularly, and I want to drive this point home, even if they're fine and they don't want to talk about it, here's the message that their children will get from you. It's okay to talk about COVID. It's okay to worry about COVID. It's okay to be angry about COVID. My parents are strong enough to hear what I have to say and to answer my questions. And that will be their best antidote to anxiety, feeling soothed and supported by you. So, Rachie, are there any questions that have come up?
Yes, there are. Hold on. There are quite a few questions coming in, actually. So let me pull them up. Okay, so this first one's a pretty big question. You mentioned not falsely reassuring. When my child is feeling anxious, they are constantly asking me the same question and bringing up the same scenario they are nervous about again and again. There's a few parts to the question. Number one, should I be reassuring them? No amount of reassurance seems to calm them. And is there ever a time where we just shut down the conversation, like talking about it anymore isn't going to be helpful?
Okay. If I forget the last part of the question, ask me. So reassurance is really a double-edged sword. That's the way I like to think about it. It feels very good in the moment to tell a child that everything will be okay. The child feels better in the moment. The parent feels better in the moment too, because we really want it to be true that everything will be okay. But there's a couple of inherent risks with over reassurance. What if everything turns out to not be okay? It becomes what I consider a potential breach of trust between you and your child. Mom, you told me, you promised me that it would be okay. That's what will come back to you. Or they won't say anything back to you, but they'll internalize, I'm not getting an honest answer from my mom. Even a young child can have that thought. Something didn't add up about what my mom told me. That's one of the dangers of falsely reassuring. The second part, important part about over reassurance or false reassurance is that it really rescues a child and prevents a child from having to manage their own anxiety. And it's so counterintuitive, but reassuring an anxious child is contrary to helping them. It's the opposite of what you should do, as crazy as that sounds. Because in the moment, it feels good, as I said. And the child has this moment where his mind relaxes because he got some reassurance for you. And the takeaway in a child's mind is the way I feel better is by going externally and getting support from someone, and then I feel better. But the other piece is the child, very soon, that relaxed feeling will lift off of him, and he won't have any strategies to help himself calm down. So the best and the healthiest way to reassure a child, in my view, is to remind a child that they have the capacity to work at managing their own anxiety, and that you can reassure them about. And even if it's a tiny capacity, it's a capacity, and you can help them learn how to deal with anxiety. You can reassure them that it is hard to feel worried. It's very hard. We all feel worried at times, but you can also add that it helps to talk back to worries. It also is hard to face a fear despite when you're experiencing big feelings, but it's important to talk back to those fears and big feelings also. And lastly, about, what I guess what I'd call cheap reassurance. I don't know about you, but I've been told by people who love me and care about me, don't worry, or you shouldn't think about that. So I'm asking you, has that really ever helped anybody? Anybody? And that's a form of really, it's cheap reassurance. So I think the last part of the question is, when is it enough? When do I stop? You make a good point. With children, too much conversation is never a good idea. So the way I would end a conversation like that, first of all, I would go after we all have the capacity or the ability or the inner stuff to help ourselves. And let's talk more about this tomorrow. When you feel like the child is just going over the same thing and begging you for reassurance, I think it's okay to end with, I can never predict the future for you, but I can predict this for you. You can learn to calm yourself down, and I can help you. And let's talk more. We talked enough today. Let's continue this tomorrow. Don't wait for your child to come and ask you to continue it. Seek them out. I hope that answers that question.
That does. That's a great answer. Thank you. I'm just going to remind people, if you want your questions to remain anonymous, then just ask them using the Q&A button. Otherwise, you can use any of the other forms on the bottom to ask. Okay, the next question that came in, you say to give children honest information. My kids keep asking me, when will COVID be over? I really don't know how to give them an honest answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good one. There's always going to be questions, as you all know, that children ask that we wish we knew the answers to. So what are the examples that come to mind? And to my mind anyways, I'm sure you have your own. Here's a few from my mind. Why did that person have to die? Why are people so cruel? And the older kids ask, why are people so evil? Over the last year, I've heard, why do non-Jews hate us so much? So those are big questions, big life questions that we all ask ourselves. I don't have to tell you, we don't know the answer to a lot of those questions. And I think that should be made clear to kids that we don't have an answer for them. But here's the important part. Before you say, I don't know the answer, the most important thing you could do is normalize and validate their question. What I would tell them is, I'd say I'd be in the process with them. You're really thinking about this. You're really wondering about this. That's validating to hear. And some ways, especially older children, they kind of know they're not going to get oh, well, here's the answer. But they're really working on this in their own age appropriate way. And we want to validate that. This means a lot to you. I can see you've been thinking about this a lot. I would tell them it's the same thing that we as adults are wondering about, because that's true. And then if you want, you can give them some possibilities. You could share your own thinking. If it's a COVID question, I might say something like, after I've validated them, I might say, maybe it will end when we get a vaccine. Maybe it will end when the virus stops spreading. Maybe it will end when Hashem decides it's time for it to stop spreading. I don't know, but we're all wondering the same thing as you. And here's the final important nugget. It's okay and it's good to think about these and ask these questions. And I may not have the answers, but here's what I want to tell you. I always want to hear your questions. And that should be the walk away message for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's really helpful, Lynn. Okay, a few more questions still. I know I should show strength for my child, but I'm very worn out with all of this, and I have a lot of trouble feeling strong, let alone showing strength. Any suggestions?
Yeah. So what parent has not had the same question at some point over the last 6 months? I'm going to recommend some strategies that come from the Resilience Playbook. And I know that Madrigos is having a parenting talk coming up that's focused on resilience. Here's some ways to build your own strength, again, from the resilience thinking. And these are things that you can do to model this for your children. The things I'm right now thinking about are really simple and doable, and that's why I'm going to throw them out now. But of course, there's a lot more. So the first thing, so a couple things. The first thing I would suggest is that we all kind of do the name it and claim it activity with ourselves. That's a name I think I've coined, but I know you know this. Identify the specific feeling or fear that is haunting you. Okay, so I'll share my experience of this. For me, despite my attempts to suppress it, I am haunted by the uncertainty of when I will see my children again who live in Israel. It seems to flutter around in my mind. But when I sense, I'm getting better at this, but when I sense that worry is lurking in the background, no matter what I'm doing, it sort of pops up and is lurking there. I say my hellos to it. I accuse it of trying to make me anxious. And then I feel a little better able to move on. I've named it. I don't stay with the fluttery, free-floating anxiety. I ask myself, I'm curious about it. What is happening right now? Why am I having that fluttery, free-floating anxiety? Because when you bring something into the light, you largely, not entirely, but you largely disempower it. Is this something you can do out loud in the presence of your children, or you don't have to do it in the presence of your children? But of course, I recommend modeling that for your children. The second thing I'd say is choose where to put your attention. So I am a cognitive therapist, and this is a cognitive strategy, and it's really why we do those gratitude lists. And you're probably familiar with writing down all the things you're grateful for, because the cognitive reason for that is situations are very rarely completely negative. The problem is that we're very hardwired to notice the negatives. Most of us are hardwired to notice the negatives. So the idea is to work on expanding your focus, not denying that things are lousy now, but expanding it to identify some positives in your life. And you will definitely find that it will balance the negatives, and it should cause your weariness to dissipate a little bit more. Also, a resilience or cognitive strategy. And the third thing, again, cognitive, to the best of your ability, use a problem-solving strategy rather than being driven by emotions. And the easiest way to do that is or one of the simple ways to do that is to ask yourself. Again, it takes being curious, looking into yourself, but to ask yourself, is what I'm thinking right now, or is what I'm feeling right now, is what I'm doing right now, is it helping me or is it harming me? Literally ask yourself to identify what's happening internally and ask yourself the question. You will feel energized by the simple process of doing this because you are choosing then an option and you're evaluating the option. It's demonstrating some control over your thinking. There's so much more to say about this question, and there are so many useful strategies. And look, some are going to resonate for you and work for you, and some are just not. But there are always choices and options waiting to be explored in our minds.
Okay,
I hope
great.
that's helpful.
This is so helpful. I feel like I'm walking away with so many practical tools as a parent. This is great. Okay, two more questions that I have in right now. One is right now we have COVID in our family, and my son is very anxious and nervous that he's going to die, dreaming about death. Can you give me some practical skills to calm him down because his behavior is extremely impulsive?
Okay. I don't know how old that child is. Does it say? Doesn't say,
No,
right?
it doesn't
Okay.
say.
And you can hear that I'm very oriented according to age group, because if this was a 5-year-old, I might think about it differently than a 10-year-old. But let's assume it's let's assume it's somewhere in the middle, an 8-year-old. I don't know, Mom, how you're responding to him. That would be important for me to hear. Oh, thank you. He's 13. Okay, that's fine too. I didn't mention this, but it's important for a parent, hard to do, but important to respond to another anxious person, your child or any person, with calm. Because when they look you in the eyes and you're talking slowly, gently, softly, calmly, it will help them come down a little bit too. Even in the moment, it's sort of a mirroring effect. So that's number one. Before we even talk about what to say, be sure that you're in a place to respond to him. The next thing I would do is within, like was mentioned before, within a reasonable period of time, I'd ask him to externalize what's happening in his mind. I'm scared, I'm worried. Tell me what you're worried about. I'm scared someone's going to get sick. Do you have someone in mind that you're scared about? Is there a reason you're thinking about that person? So I want to, again, contrary to that free-floating, frenzied, I'm anxious, I want to help a person realize, even a 13-year-old, that they can sort of parse out what's happening internally for them. So get them to talk a little bit about. Now, if you can, I might ask them what their biggest fear about it is. And they might say, I'm afraid that person's going to die. I'm hypothesizing here because I don't want to make light of this question. Maybe this child is afraid that someone they love is going to die. A way to think about it is, again, to let them know, I can't predict the future. I don't even want to talk about who could die or who can't, because I don't have any way of knowing. But here's what I do know, my child. So-and-so is sick, is receiving medical care, is at the best doctors, is smart enough to follow the advice of the doctors, is taking care in her home to do what she needs to do. I would try and lean into what the person is doing to not be sick or be hospitalized, if this is relevant. Lean more that way. I would communicate about it the next day again with him. Are you still thinking about that person? What's your thought today? To keep the conversation going. I would make sure to keep that child adherent to the routines in the house and the structure, even if they're anxious. And the last part is I would remind the child about what you do to bring meaning to this hard time in your life as a family. We're going to keep davening and saying Tehillim for the person we love that is sick. We're going to drop stuff off at their house that could help them. We're going to do mitzvos that will help them. We're going to keep talking about it as a family. I'm going to help you try and see that when you're feeling anxious, you can remind yourself about these things. She's being taken care of. She's taking medicine. Everybody who knows her, her doctors and her family, is trying to help her get better. And we really hope and believe that she will get better with all this care.
I think, Lynn, just to clarify one point here, I think this particular child is scared about themselves dying, that they have COVID.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, I don't know if I asked it clearly. That's okay.
You know, I would explore that whole dying thing with the child and what they know, what they've talked to other people about dying, who they know that's died, because it's sitting in their mind. Has a friend talked to them about dying? Has a teacher, have they overheard something about dying? Again, back to the point of what have you heard about people dying? What do you think happens to a person when they get that sick? Do you think they just drop dead? Do they just die like that? I would tell them again about all the things that can be done when a person gets sick. A 13-year-old needs to know the truth. We don't know who's going to live and who's going to die, but you can always, again, lean into the things that keep them healthy and well. Most people don't die, that we know. In fact, the reality is very few people die. I would help him, and I don't know if this is going too far with this parent, and if this parent wants to talk to me offline about it, that's fine. I might talk to him a little bit more about recognizing that when he has these thoughts, his whole body gets more nervous, and we could talk about substituting in some calming thoughts. He's 13 and he should be able to learn to have the ability to do that. Recognize when his anxiety is starting to spike and pull out his card of different thoughts to have. And those thoughts will not be, I don't have to worry about this. The thoughts will be something that resonates with him that you as a parent can help him write, so that when he's starting to get anxious, he pulls out his little card to remind himself that he's healthy and what happens to people when they get sick, how we're taking care of people who get sick. There's a lot more to say about this. I'd like to hear more details exactly about what he's saying. So again, Rachie, I'm perfectly open to having this parent contact me offline if they want a little more general guidance about this.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, the final question that came in is, when do I know like what's normal anxiety for given the times that we're going through, and when do I need to get my child help?
So I was trying to reference this in my earlier comments. So all children are changing to some degree, but if the change in your child, whatever reactions you see, are moving towards a point at which they are not, I use the word savoring, I'm trying to think of a different word. A child's job is to thrive in the different domains of their life. When they stop thriving, and if it's a change for them, they were thriving before, but now they don't want to talk to their friends. They can't sleep at night, but they used to sleep at night. They don't want to go to school or do their schoolwork. when you see enough of that happening, I would suggest that you talk to a professional and see if they could benefit from some help. A child's job is to enjoy and be functioning in these domains of their life. When you see a change significant enough, you don't have to say, I think it's anxiety, I think it's this, I think it's that. You can just say, my child has changed and I want him to get back to enjoying those parts of his life and functioning in those parts of his life. That's it. That's enough of a reason to seek professional help. Again, it's not minimal changes. It's changes where you as a parent see that something significant has shifted for the child. They're withdrawing from their life.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, that is it for the questions. Lynn, this was so incredible, so informative, really, really practical. I think everyone's walking away with a lot of skills. I'm glad everyone got to see this incredible resource that we have as part of our team, and just really appreciate you imparting your wisdom to us, and look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Okay, thank you, Rachie. Thanks, everyone.